Respected Chief Guest, distinguished dignitaries on the dais, esteemed colleagues, and my dear students, a very warm and gracious welcome to each one of you present here today. Good morning. I am Dr. Kaushai Banerjee, Professor in the Department of Language and Literature, Bengali, and Associate Dean Student Affairs at Adamas University. And it is my privilege to serve as one of the Masters of Ceremony for today's inaugural session. I am equally delighted to be joined by Dr. Ankita Roy, Assistant Professor, School of Liberal Arts and Culture Studies, Program Political Science and International Relations, and Director of the IAS Division at Adamas University, who is also the coordinator of this seminar. Together, we shall have the honor of guiding you through today's proceedings. It is indeed a matter of great pride and pleasure to gather on this auspicious occasion as we inaugurate this significant seminar on India and the changing world order. At the outset, let me extend my heartfelt gratitude to our Honorable Chancellor Sir, Professor Samit Ray, and Honorable Vice Chancellor Sir, Professor Suranjan Das, and all honored guests for gracing this occasion with their presence. Your participation adds immense value and inspiration to this program. We begin today's proceeding with the ceremonial lighting of the lamp, a tradition deeply rooted in our cultural ethos. The lighting of the lamp symbolizes the dispelling of darkness and the ushering in of knowledge, wisdom, and enlightenment. It reminds us that education is not merely the acquisition of information, but the illumination of the mind and the soul. I now humbly request our esteemed chief guests, along with all other dignitaries on the dais, to please come up on the dais for lighting the ceremonial lamp.
या कुन्देन्दु तुषारहारधवला या शुभ्रवस्त्रावृता या वीणावरदण्डमण्डितकरा या श्वेतपद्मासना या ब्रह्माच्युतशङ्कर प्रभृतिभिः देवैः सदा वन्दिता सा मां पातु सरस्वती भगवती निःशेषजाड्यापहा।
Now it is the time for felicitation, requesting our Honorable Chancellor Sir, Professor Samit Ray, along with Registrar Sir, to come up on the dais to kindly felicitate Sri Vijay Gokhale Sir. Requesting Sri Vijay Gokhale sir to stay back on the stage along with Honorable Chancellor sir. Please take your seat. Now I would request our Honorable Chancellor sir to felicitate Sri Krishnan Srinivasan sir. Please come up on the stage, sir. Thank you, sir. Requesting our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Suranjan Das, to kindly felicitate Sri Shishir Priyadarshi, sir. Please. Please have your seat, sir. Now, we would request Chintan Research Foundation's President, Sri Shishir Priyadarshi, to kindly give a token of appreciation to our Honorable Chancellor, sir. Will you please help students? Now, to our Honorable Vice Chancellor, sir, Professor Suranjan Das. To Sri Gokhale, sir. And to Sri Srinivasan, sir. And now, to introduce the theme of today's seminar and to formally present our distinguished dignitaries, I invite Dr. Ankita Roy.
It is a privilege to welcome you all to this one-day seminar on India and the changing world order organized by Adamas University in collaboration with Chintan Research Foundation. If one were to describe the contemporary world order today, it would perhaps be fair to say that we are living in a time where uncertainty has become the only certainty. The frameworks that once defined global stability are being continuously questioned, renegotiated, and at times quietly reimagined. In fact, if I add a gentle note of humor, international relations today sometimes feels like a carefully scripted play where the actors keep changing their roles mid-performance while the audience is expected to keep up with the shifting script. But beneath this fluidity lies a deeper structural transformation. We are witnessing a shift from relatively stable power structures to a far more complex and layered global order marked by strategic competition, economic recalibration, technological contestations, and evolving alliances. And in this shifting landscape, India's role becomes particularly significant. India today is not merely responding to global changes, it is actively shaping them through its approach of strategic autonomy, its engagement across multiple axes of power, and its articulation of the concerns of the global south. The theme of today's seminar, Indo-China Relations, Indo-Russian Dynamics, and India's rise in the global order, are therefore not isolated discussions, but critical lenses through which we understand broader transformations in international politics. More importantly, today's platform brings together those who have not only studied these changes but have actively participated in shaping them. And perhaps that is where the true importance of the seminar lies, not just in analyzing the world as it is, but in collectively reflecting on the world as it is becoming. It is now my privilege to formally introduce the distinguished dignitaries present with us today. We have with us Shri Shishir Priyadarshi. Sir is the president of the Chintan Research Foundation, a policy think tank focused on translating strategic reflection into actionable ideas for people-centric development, particularly across climate change and energy transition, economy and trade, and geopolitics. Earlier, he served as director at the World Trade Organization, where he worked on global trade governance, development negotiations, and policy coherence, with a strong emphasis on developing country and global south perspectives. He has also spent over 2 decades in the Indian Administrative Service, holding senior positions at state and central levels, including roles linked to economic management, industry, finance, and interministerial coordination. He holds an MA in economics from the University of Reading, UK, and an MSc in nuclear physics from Delhi University, earning gold medals in both. He maintains active academic affiliations in India and internationally. We are honored to have Sri Krishnan Srinivasan, former Foreign Secretary of India, whose distinguished diplomatic career includes ambassadorships across multiple countries and leadership roles at the Commonwealth. Krishnan Srinivasan sir has an MA from Oxford and joined the Indian Foreign Service in 1959. After ambassadorships in 5 countries, Libya, Zambia, Nigeria, Netherlands, and Bangladesh, he was Indian Foreign Secretary from 1994 to 1995. He was then Deputy Secretary General of the Commonwealth till 2002. Subsequently, he was a visiting fellow at Cambridge, Leiden, and Uppsala. He has published 9 books on international relations and more than 750 columns in Indian media, the latest being Power, Legitimacy, and World Order, Routledge, in 2023. It is a great privilege to welcome Sri Vijay Gokhale. Sir is an esteemed diplomat and accomplished scholar. He has served as India's High Commissioner to Malaysia and Ambassador to Germany and China. He assumed the role of India's Foreign Secretary thereafter. Currently, Mr. Gokhale is a distinguished professor at Symbiosis International University in Pune, where he imparts his knowledge and expertise to the next generation of diplomats, and as a non-resident senior fellow at Carnegie, India, further solidifying his influence in the field of foreign policy. He is the recipient of the 2024 Ramnath Goenka Award for Excellence in Journalism in the non-fiction category for his book, The Long Game: How the Chinese Negotiate with India. Mr. Gokhale's expertise and insights have also been featured in prominent international publications, including the New York Times, the Berlin Pulse, Foreign Policy, Australian Strategic Policy Institute, American Purpose, Spiegel, as well as leading Indian newspapers such as The Hindu, The Indian Express, and The Times of India. We are delighted to have with us Dr. Indrani Talukdar. Dr. Indrani Talukdar is a fellow at Chintan Research Foundation. Her focus area of work is Eurasia, covering Russia, the Baltics, Caucasus, and the neighboring areas. She also focuses on the geopolitics of Turkey and its foreign policy. Apart from these specific areas, her interest also lies in international relations studies, security studies, conflict resolution, and peace studies, as well as in the geopolitics of the Arctic. Before this, Dr. Talukdar was a faculty at Sushma Swaraj Institute of Foreign Service, Ministry of External Affairs, where she helped in the training of the Indian Foreign Service officer trainees and other officers of the Ministry of External Affairs. Dr. Talukdar has also worked at the Indian Council of World Affairs, New Delhi, as a research fellow. With such an exceptional gathering of minds, we are truly poised for a meaningful and enriching exchange. Because while the world order may not always offer clarity, it certainly demands responsibility. And it is through informed dialogue such as this that we move from uncertainty to understanding and from understanding to meaningful action. On that note, to formally set the tone for today's seminar, it is now my honor to invite our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Shuranjan Das, to deliver the welcome address and take the proceedings forward. So.
My Honorable Chancellor, Sir Dr. Shomit Ray, the Chairman of Chintan Research Foundation, Mr. Shishir Priyadarshi, esteemed Ambassador, Mr. Vijay Gokhale, who was also a former Secretary, esteemed members of the House, which includes my colleagues and dear students, as well as Mr. Srinivasan, the esteemed former Foreign Secretary of India, who has always been a source of inspiration. Dr. Indrani Talukdar of Chintan Research Foundation, Professor Shantanu Chakraborty of Kolkata University and also the adjunct Professor Adamas, Dr. Shivaji Pratim Basu, distinguished research Professor Adamas, and friends from the media. It is indeed a personal pleasure and privilege to welcome you on behalf of Adamas University to this seminar. We remain indebted to Chintan Research Foundation, especially to Mr. Priyadarshi, for supporting this seminar. I think this marks Chintan's first public academic presence in the city of joy. And I do hope that this would be the entry point for a continuous and constructive Adamas-Chintan relationship. Time has come to move out of the cloistered walls of Delhi to develop a constructive discourse on Indian foreign policy by considering the multiple perceptions of the country. I see the present seminar in this context. I do hope Mr. Priyadarshi will facilitate such future exercises, which will certainly be beneficial not only for the policymakers of India, but also for the scholars at large. I take particular pleasure in warmly welcoming Mr. Priyadarshi to this seminar. We are indeed grateful to Ambassador Vijay Gokhale for being with us despite his busy schedule to deliver the keynote address. Thank you very much, sir, for being with us today. And he has the unique distinction of being the only Indian Foreign Service officer to have served both mainland China and Taiwan. Your presence, sir, has certainly taken the seminar to new heights, and we do look forward to welcoming you to Adamas in future. We are also keen to develop ties with the Pune International Center, with which you, sir, you are deeply connected. Significantly, Mr. Gokhale's keynote session will be presided by another former distinguished Foreign Secretary, Ambassador Srinivasan, and I'm sure that will have a very exciting session, and we do look forward to that. I did not formally welcome our Honorable Chancellor, Professor Shomit Ray, but let me put on record that it is his vision of academic excellence which drives the academic community of Adamas forward. And as has always been the case, Professor Ray has also ensured full infrastructure and moral support for this seminar. Thank you very much, sir. Friends, I need not overstress the significance of the problematic chosen for today's deliberations at a time when the rule-based order is being shattered, a point which has been succinctly mentioned by Ankita. We can perhaps no longer think of a unified Western hegemon, while the US tariff war and the growing strains on the World Trading Organization have put the global trading system, as Shishir Priyadarshi demonstrates in a very recent article in Economic Times, at an inflection point. There is also a growing divergence in political values and governance models, which is complicating collective efforts to address such transnational issues as climate change, cybersecurity, and public health. But the crucial question is, does it mean the end of a world order? Perhaps not. Indeed, As I see it, it perhaps opens opportunities for a more plural and representative and multipolar global order, where regional competing visions of order will coexist. The challenge now lies in managing this plurality without descending into instability. As I see it, as a leader of G20, aptly testified to by its role in the G20 summits and the BRICS, India is significantly poised to provide a leadership in this realm. And herein, sir, lies the significance of today's seminar. It is reasonable to contend that the wherewithal of this leadership will come from the three pillars of India's foreign policy. First, sustaining strategic autonomy while deepening selective partnerships, a point mentioned by Yonkita. Second, converting domestic capabilities like manufacturing, digital public infrastructure, and institutional coherence into credible external influence. And third, by supplying global public life goods like climate resilience and inclusive multilateralism, which are yielding rich dividends, as evident in our effective tackling of the present energy crisis compared to our South Asian neighbors and even Europe. Not unnaturally, our esteemed External Affairs Minister, Dr. Jaishankar, had recently remarked, and I quote, "When the global order is under churn, the international community is well served by the growing endeavors of a power that is comfortable with the world. A stronger India will undertake greater responsibilities and facilitate the de-risking of the international economy. Strategically, India's voice and influence will strengthen those who seek respect for national norms, rules, and law." Unquote. This quote from Dr. Jaishankar's Nani Palkiwala Memorial Lecture could perhaps be, sir, the backdrop of today's seminar. As I warmly welcome you all to this seminar, I should be failing in my duty if I do not reiterate that the seminar could not have been organized without the coordinating role of a young and energetic colleague, Dr. Ankita Ray, and my compatriots in the School of Liberal Arts and Social Sciences and the Law Faculty. Sir, once again, I take this opportunity to warmly and sincerely welcome you all to this seminar, which I am sure will be fruitful and academically rewarding. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, sir, for your address. Now, to deliver the inaugural address, let us welcome Mr. Shishir Priyadarshi, sir.
Professor Ranjan Das, the chairperson of this university, Samitra ji, two both senior and amazingly distinguished colleagues, Vijay Gokhale ji and Srinivasan ji, and lots of people who I see in this hall. Obviously, you don't come to such a place without preparing some notes, so I have notes. But when you come here and you see a lot of young people, and I walked through the university for the last 10 minutes, some of the notes that you have made, you want to put aside. The reason being, well, the first most important reason being that you have two senior colleagues from the Foreign Service who've been phenomenal diplomats for the country, ambassadors for the country, and who better than them to talk about India and the changing world order. No matter how well I'll try, I'll only come a second. But I'll still share some thoughts, but that I'll do later. I met Dr. Suranjan Das no more than maybe 6 months ago. I'd not known him. And to be very honest, I did not even know about your university. And I think the energy that he exuded in that very short meeting was probably the biggest push factor in our think tank, the Chintan Research Foundation, which actually is in its infancy. We are only about a year and a few months old. in wanting to do something out of Delhi. This has been said, there is so much focus in Delhi, there is so much focus, you're often just talking to the same set of people again and again. And exactly those very policies which we talk about in Delhi have a completely different meaning if you move away from Delhi. And especially if you can move into a group or a gathering where we hope are people who will be contributing in some way or the other to public policy in the years to come. So I must say this in your presence, in the presence of the Chancellor, that Professor Shraddhan Das was extremely energetic, extremely keen, and no matter what we talked about, I must say, he wanted it done yesterday rather than tomorrow. And very honestly, I think no matter what he would have said, would not have prepared me for Professor Samit Ray, what you have set up. It's not an easy task. And to have a university with so many faculties, with close to 9,000 or over 9,000 students, and know what, in a period of 10 years, as you mentioned, I think it's an outstanding achievement. But just like any home, the house is built with bricks and mortars, but the home is built by people. And similarly, while the university has a vision, the university has a chancellor, but it is all of you who will actually kind of be the real ambassadors of the university as you proceed on your professional careers from here. Now, in that context, let me just say two things. One, it is certainly a very, very, I would say, important time for those of you who are studying public policy in any form, and those of you who are studying international relations, perhaps even more so. Now, the world is definitely in a churn. It is not the kind of, global order that existed when we were studying it. It was certainly not the kind of global order which existed when I was working in the WTO for many years. You could either call it a complete breakdown of the way we had perceived globalization, or perhaps better still, we should really regard it as a mutation. It's changing, it's bound to be there. Is the change in our hands? Can we kind of perhaps, give direction to the way it's changing? Possibly very little. India is a very important player, but India also has this very, very strong principle of strategic autonomy, of multidimensional alignment, not necessarily, as different from non-alignment. So if we can't, in a manner of speaking, influence that change, we must be prepared to react to it. We must be continuously evolving in our approach. Now, I'm going to give you 2 or 3 examples of this, and perhaps at the end, which is something which I thought I would share with you, what's the utility of both people, whom you're yet to speak, hear speak, and people like me, is to give you some thoughts on what work you can do on issues that have probably not been worked upon. I'm sure as part of your program, you will write papers, some people will write op-eds, some people might want to do a small dissertation. We want to leave some thoughts and ideas with you on what to do. And if any of you pick up those ideas, we'll be very happy to receive them through your Vice Chancellor. We'll be very, very happy to publish them on Chintan's website. We would even be we'd actually be delighted to make this a two-way interaction. Just like Delhi must spread out and come here, we must also have at least some groups of you being exposed to what is happening in Delhi for short periods. And we are very, very happy to host a small group periodically, which comes into Chintan, which spends time there, and we've got some brilliant fellows like Dr. Indrani that you must interact with her a little more when you get the time. And these are people who can mentor you even in the short space of a week. The dimension that you're thinking on must expand. Just like, let's take, as I said, I'll give you a few examples. Working in the World Trade Organization, you were told that the more dependent countries are on each other, the more global stability will come about. If I'm dependent on someone for import, dependent on someone for export. So for the last 20, 25 years, most countries worked towards creating dependencies. And what better way was this reflected than the fact that from regimes when we used to have a make in India or a make in China or a make in the USA, today the trade in what I would say intermediary products far exceeds the trade in finished products. So you pick up, this is a very classic example, you pick up an iPhone, is probably been made in 7 countries. Parts here, part there, you assemble it, you add value, you move on. The reason for very strongly creating that dependency was, other than obviously that every country should be producing what you do most efficiently and then trading the rest, but it was also the fact that dependency would lead to stability. After all, GATT, which was the precursor of WTO, had come into being post-World War II. And even though the foundings were economic, but it was certainly one of the main reasons was also global stability. But today, that dependence itself is being weaponized. If you're dependent on someone, that is being weaponized. And if you are not dependent on someone, even that independence is being weaponized. There are big powers, there are big countries. The United States is obviously the forefront amongst them. They would now want to be very clear about who trades with whom. If you're not trading with a friend of mine, then we don't want you to trade. Whereas India for a long time had very consciously followed that I could be friends with a country A and I could be friends with a country B, even if countries A and B did not totally get along with themselves. But that itself, the concept of strategic autonomy itself is being challenged. So we are certainly passing through a churn. We are certainly passing through a period which is completely changing about. Now, what is it that we should be doing during this period? I'm just going to make one suggestion, and that is, it is extremely important to keep questioning. Do not accept that one sentence which says, this is how we did it in the last year, this is how we did it in the last decade. In Hindi, sir, there is a saying, and I'm going to just quote it to you, translate it too. In Hindi, there's a saying that keval मूर्ख और मृतक ही अपने विचार नहीं बदलते हैं. And I'm certain that all of us here are neither obviously in any of those two categories, and therefore we must continue to question. An example which I'm sure will come out perhaps this afternoon in the sessions you have, or when you listen to people like Ambassador Gokhale. The last 2-3 weeks, sir, has seen a sudden change in how the world had perceived Pakistan. Pakistan was always perceived as an outlier, financial, completely ruins, dependency, even, extremism and supporting terrorism. And suddenly, it is now being seen as an interlocutor. Now, a question which we must ask, that did India do the right thing in continuing its somewhat, I would say, measured silence? Could we have hindsight? Let's not forget this. Hindsight makes all our visions 6 by 6. But in hindsight itself, and that is what universities and students must do, you really must look at this. Could we have done things differently? More importantly, should we have done things differently? Were there more risks involved, like we are seeing? Was it still, obviously we had good relations with all three. We have at least working relations, let's say, with all three. Israel, Iran, and the US. Could we have done this? I'm not taking sides here at all. Or what we did was the best way forward. Because yes, there's certainly big risks in all this. So this probably is an example which should give rise, at least in your minds, to what I would even call the defining paradox of our time. Because in a way, this defining paradox is what some people are calling a complete conceptual inversion. Just like in the WTO, there has been a conceptual inversion where efficiency was the cornerstone of relations or the cornerstone of the way global rules would be framed. You suddenly have a system where it's not efficiency, from nearshoring to the word we now friend-shoring. So you're not necessarily procuring what you need from the most efficient, the most reasonable, but you are procuring it from countries that you think would continue to supply what you are getting from them even in the times of crises. And clearly, the implications that I would share with you, three of them, and I think all three implications probably will get talked about as examples during the afternoon. The first is the distinction between domestic and international policy is definitely breaking down. It's very, very difficult today to take any international decisions without seeing what is the impact on your domestic constituency. An example being, for instance, if a bigger power than yours, and I don't talk about India, you talk about any other country, if a bigger power than yours publicly goes out and says that this is what we would like the other country to do, which might 20 years, possibly a decision might have been taken. But today you simply, the government there cannot take that decision because of the impact it will be seen as having, well, you bowed your knees to a foreign power. So there is a huge domestic compulsion on international policy. Secondly, the hierarchy of power is definitely becoming more complex because power is no longer about aggregate capability, but about positional, situational within networks. And that is when groups like the G20, groups like BRICS, that is the kind of alignment, or even the kind of alignment that economic free trade agreements are giving us becomes. And third, and this is probably what it is, that change or uncertainty is no longer going to be episodic. It's not going to be, a change will come or there'll be a crisis and it'll go away. You will probably move from one crisis to the other. And countries that are nimble, countries where public policy is nimble, flexible, where you're not entirely dependent on what's happened in the past, that is what is going to help. India is certainly I must say, and this is a compliment to both the government at the political and at the bureaucratic level, we are certainly trying to keep one step ahead. But it is not going to stop. It is not going to be easy to come. Let me, as I said, let me just share 3 or 4 those of you not interested can absolutely ignore it. Those of you who find this wonderful hall so comfortable and the seat so comfortable that you're half dozing, no problem at all. Yes, like the gentleman next to you, that's not a problem. But the fact is, I'm sure some of you will be keen, will be interested. I'm going to just put forward 3 or 4 or 5 issues that you may wish to look at. Interdependence is there to stay. So can interdependence be structured in a way that preserves the benefits of interdependence while mitigating the vulnerabilities which some of the big powers are continuously pushing to expose? So just look at this fact of interdependence. You might come to the conclusion that such a balance is not possible at all and that we are now going to be in permanent system. But just this one key word about interdependence. Second issue for possibly consideration of those who wish. New, statecraft. Your foreign policy is a form of statecraft. So what forms of economic statecrafts are emerging in this new environment? I mean, do we need, you had a traditional way that foreign policy was conducted, a traditional way in which, nations did statecraft, but are there now new ways? Can we think ahead? And if so, how would they be different? What would be the pros and cons of this emerging statecraft? Third, what kind of institutions? I think this will be very, very key. What kinds of institutions, whether formal or informal, can in a way, facilitate competitive interdependence. This is not just a geopolitical issue, this is much more a geo-economic issue, but I think it is certainly worth considering. And finally, in all of these questions, or as a separate question, you can certainly look at the fact, what kind of a role can India or should India play? I don't think these are theoretical questions. I certainly wouldn't have shared them if it was just as a theoretical question. I think they're very, very practical questions, and you just might see many of these questions, the answers of many of these questions coming out as you read the papers or listen to the news over the next few months. So to conclude, I've gone beyond the time you had said. To conclude, the world is not becoming less ordered. And don't be under any kind of illusion that merely time will make it more ordered. No. But if you think it is going to be the most positive way of seeing how it is becoming less ordered, is you should think of it as becoming differently ordered. You know, if you think it's less ordered and then it's going to disorder, no. Just think it's going to be differently ordered, and therefore we'll have to perceive that as the existing reality. The logic of that order shifting from one which was based on assumed cooperation to one which will have to be shaped by managed competition, but still with independence, is what we are likely to see in the coming years. In such a world, power will not belong to those who can dominate, but to those who can navigate. Domination would be for some part, some time, some here, but it is the ability to be able to drive a car through a crowded street without blowing your horn. That is what will set countries apart. Because you would need to balance openness with security, you'll have to balance flexibility with credibility, and certainly ambition with restraint. So, in a world that is emerging, power, as I said, will not belong to those who can escape interdependence, because that is bound to be there. But it will belong to those who can shape interdependence, and to that extent, the changing world order is not a settled reality. It is a field of inquiry for all of you to explore. With those words, huge thanks, sir.
Thank you, sir, for your encouraging and enriching words. Now, let us all welcome our Honorable Chancellor, Sir, Professor Samit Ray, for delivering the special address for the session. Sir, please.
Very good afternoon to all. It is both an honor and a responsibility for Adamas University to host this seminar on India and the changing world order in collaboration with the Chintan Research Foundation. At a time when global power dynamics are undergoing rapid shifts, such partnerships move beyond academic formality and become meaningful platforms for understanding and engaging with these changes. I extend a warm and gracious welcome to our distinguished guest, Mr. K. Srinivasan, former Foreign Secretary of India, Sri Vijay Gokhale, former Foreign Secretary of India, Sri Shishir Priyadarshini, President of the Chintan Research Foundation, and all other esteemed distinguished present here. I also take this opportunity to welcome our Honorable Vice Chancellor, Professor Suranjan Das, along with our respected speakers and Adamas academic fraternity and my dear students. We are gathered at a moment of significant global transitions. The relative stability of the post-Cold War era is giving way of new uncertainties, strategic relevance, are intensify economic relationships and being reliant and global institutions are facing growing pressures. The world today is not merely changing, it is becoming more complex and incrementally fragmented. In this evolving context, India's role is both important and expanding. India is navigating these complexities with a balanced approach, guided by the strategic autonomy and constructive engagement. Through its leaderships of the Global South, its active presence in multilateral forums, and its effort to build new partnership, India is contributing to a more balanced and inclusive world order. This collaboration between the Adamas University and the Chintan Research Foundation adds a special significance to today's seminars. It reflects our the shared commitment to connecting academic inquiry with the real world policy challenges. We are not only discussing global transformations, but we are also preparing young minds to understand questions and shape them. From an institutional perspective, this seminar also marks a step forward in strengthening our engagement beyond the classroom through research driven initiatives and policy oriented dialogues. At Adamas University, we are committed to creating spaces where students and scholars can interact with the participants, appreciate the applied dimensions of the international relations, and translate knowledge into informed perspectives. Such platforms enrich academic experience while also contributing to a more informed and thoughtful public discussions. I extend my sincere gratitude to all our the distinguished guests for sharing their the valuable insights, and I commend the organizers and the coordinators for creating a seminar of such contemporary relevance. I wish the seminar every success. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your address. To deliver the keynote address, let us welcome Sri Vijay Gokhale, sir, and to chair the session, let us welcome Sri Srinivasan, sir, please. Yes.
Good afternoon, everybody. Just say that I'm very happy to be a part of the first ever event organized by the Chintan Foundation in Kolkata, along with the Adamas University. It's a great privilege for us, and I hope there'll be many more such events in future. As far as Mr. Gokhale is concerned, you've already heard about his qualifications and his distinguished career from one of the announcers before me. So I won't need to say anything more about that, only to say that we welcome him to Kolkata, where he has come apparently after very many years, and we hope he'll come again. But meanwhile, please let us listen to his address on India and China relations.
Professor Ray and Professor Das, thank you for inviting me to your beautiful university. And Mr. Priyadarshi, thank you for inviting me to come and talk to the students at Adamas University. And of course, it's a great honor for me that a very senior colleague of mine, somebody who the service respects, Mr. Krishnivasan, is chairing this session. Since the topic is India and in a changing world, I think it's important for me to just say something about the world as it is today. As Mr. Priyadarshi said, we are in a period of very great transition. And as India stands on the cusp of development and progress, it's important for young people to understand where the world is going, what's happening in the world, because it's going to impact on the lives of all of us, the citizens of India. The fact is that today, international law, which is one of the foundational pillars of the global order, is being challenged not only by the United States, but by practically every major power in the world, and particularly by the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, which were all entrusted with the responsibility of keeping the world safe. And the mechanisms that were built after the Second World War, the United Nations and its associated organizations, are today in a situation where, let alone being visible, they are barely audible. We have rarely seen the Secretary General in the last 40 days of this war in the Gulf. And as a result, you have disparate actors playing peacemaker where the United Nations should be doing so. Now, of course, it is very tempting and quite easy to blame President Donald Trump of the United States for the current turmoil, or what I would certainly say is a collapse of the global order. But to my mind, I think we'd be making a mistake by doing so. I think we need to understand the origins of why the world is changing. So I'm just going to spend a brief time on that. I think we have to look back to what has happened over the past 30 years. When the Berlin Wall collapsed and the Soviet Union came down, the Western world, led by the United States, believed that they had earned the right to shape the global order in the 21st century. And they decided they would do so on two foundational pillars: Western-style democracy, which was the political pillar, and free market economics. Some of this was understandable. Western-style democracy had in the 20th century overthrown European empires in the First World War, destroyed right-wing fascism in the Second World War, and humbled the socialist leftist movements at the end of the Cold War. So they believed that this was a sustainable organizing political principle for the world, and that everyone must look and follow the political model of the United States and the rest of the Western world. And therefore, they started spreading democracy in all regions from Iraq to Afghanistan and to Latin America and Africa. So far as the second organizing principle of free markets was concerned, the West's basic view was that so long as there is an unrestrained movement, unrestricted movement of capital, goods, services, and technology across the world, their economies, their people stood to prosper, so would the rest of the world, and they would be able to control the system because they dominated technology, which was what supply chain economics is about. Unfortunately for them, 30 years later, the world hasn't panned out as they thought it would pan out. Some of it isn't their fault. Nobody anticipated 9/11, nobody anticipated COVID. But they also bear some responsibility because the global financial crisis was their creation. The rise of China, to some extent, they bear responsibility for that. They certainly bear responsibility for the return of Russia to the world stage. And as a result, there is a growing despondency if you live today in Washington, in Berlin, in Tokyo, in Paris, in London, because the world doesn't seem to have gone in the direction that you wanted it to go in. And so by the middle of the last decade, I think a majority of citizens in the United States, which is the world's leading power, believed that the international order they had created after 1945, that they had nurtured through their trillions of dollars that they had spent, that they had defended by spilling their blood in regions from the Korean Peninsula to Afghanistan, wasn't paying off and giving them benefits. And I believe that President Trump is the symptom or reflection of that unhappiness. He isn't the cause of it. Now, what we are therefore seeing is that the Americans no longer seem to have a stake in that world order that they built. They now prioritize their interests over the world's interests. They are transactional. They insist on reciprocity. And because they are so powerful, they use all kinds of pressure. And when that doesn't work, they use military force to demand compliance from the rest of the world for their own interests. And therefore, today we have to ask ourselves, is the United States committed to maintaining that global order that we are all so used to seeing for the last 70 years? And will they, going ahead, play that role? I think to do that, there are a few things that the United States may have to do, and none of them are going to be easy. The first, of course, is can they build a new domestic political consensus within that country? It is a fragmented polity at the moment. And while, of course, they have been able to build that political consensus in the past, given some of the language they are currently using, such as that they are a Christian nation, that they don't like immigration, and so on, they are talking of civilizational erasure of Western civilization by non-Westerners. It's going to be difficult to build domestic consensus because the United States of 2025 is not the United States of 1945. 30% or more of the population is non-Caucasian, and a large number of that is non-Christian as well. So building domestic unity is going to be difficult. Of course, the second thing is, can they reindustrialize and can they hold the technology edge? Again, that's something America has been able to do in the past, but today, the share of America in the global manufacturing economy is less than 15%. China stands at 28%. And to just put it in perspective, China's share of the global economy at 28% and rising is more than the share of Germany, Japan, and the United States put together as a manufacturing part of the share of their manufacturing in the global economy. Even in technology, according to a study done by the Australian Strategy Policy Institute, of the 64 new technologies which the world is dealing with, and it ranges from everything from electric vehicles to advanced optronics to air-independent underwater propulsion for the next generation of nuclear submarines. The United States led in every field in the year 2003. In the year 2024, China leads in 57 of those 64 fields. There are two fields in which America still has a very, very significant advantage. One is semiconductors, the other is jet engines. But if you read the latest US Congressional Service report issued just a couple of months back, even the United States admits that the Chinese are very close to catching up in both of them. So whether it can reindustrialize and hold a technological edge is also a question mark. The third is whether they can get back their allies and partners, because that is the core of American power, the system of alliances across the world. But after subjecting its partners and allies to a year of insult and indignity, we are seeing the result. Not a single European partner is willing to help them in the Gulf War, nor is Japan, nor is Australia. And now even the Gulf states are saying that you cannot depend on the United States of security alone. Without those partners and allies, American power will not be what it is. And lastly, whether America can manage that contradiction between the established power and a rising one, because China is the rising power. In the last century, 3 such occasions came, 2 ended badly, 1914 and 1939. In 1990, they successfully managed to deal with the rising power, but then China is not the Soviet Union. And therefore, there are 4 big challenges before the United States, and if they can't deal with them, they aren't going to be able to continue to support and maintain the global order. What about the other major power, the People's Republic of China? Because that too is a country which has a $20 trillion economy. It's the world's largest trading nation. It's the world's second largest outbound investor, and it's a global provider of technology. In fact, according to the World Bank, no country has risen in human history economically as fast as the People's Republic of China has risen. But again, for the People's Republic of China, expectations that a very large economy and a powerful military would give it access at the top table, would allow it to share power with the United States as the other major power in the world, is not happening the way they wanted it to. In fact, the West has tried to keep them out of that, not including them in the G7 and imposing technology sanctions on them in order to contain them because they can't be contained physically anymore. In the proximate and peripheral areas, their desire that these states acquiesce to them, accept their hegemony, their domination is not happening because there's pushback from countries ranging from Japan to Vietnam to India. And internationally, because they are not able to get a larger say in the international order, an order from which, of course, they are the largest beneficiary, we too have benefited from it, they are creating an alternative order for themselves. So instead of the International Trading Order, they've built the Belt and Road Initiative. Instead of the GPS system, they have PETO. Instead of internet search engines like Google, they have Sina Weibo. Instead of payment methods like MasterCard or Visa card, they have Union Pay. They have WeChat instead of Google Pay. They have DeepSeek instead of ChatGPT. And they have Space Sail in place of Starlink. They're building an alternate universe. In addition to that, we all think that China at 20 million is going to grow the way it has, but they also have deep structural problems, and these are only just emerging. The economy is slowing down. It can't, of course, grow at double digits when it's at 20 trillion, the way it could when it was at 4 or 10 trillion. But it's also facing economic headwinds, which have come at a rather unexpected time for it, just when it thought it was on the cusp of replacing the United States as the world's global power. The first problem is excess supply of goods. It's just producing too many goods. The manufacturing share is 28% and growing, but the capacity of the rest of the world to absorb that has certainly reached a limit. At 4 or 10 trillion, the rest of the world was keen to buy Chinese goods. At a $20 trillion economy size, the rest of the world doesn't want it when its own industry is being destroyed because China can make it cheaper. And so you have trade defense measures as a result of which people aren't buying those goods anymore, and excess capacity is growing in China. It manufactures twice the number of electric vehicles than the whole world needs. It now has it has 3 times the number of photovoltaic cells than the world needs. It has more steel, cement, and plate glass than the world needs. Now, inevitably, what countries do when there's an excess supply is you create domestic demand. And that's what President Xi Jinping has been trying to do unsuccessfully for the last 10 years. Why isn't it happening? Well, for a number of reasons. One is what is called negative wealth effect. For a population addicted to being told that they're going to have double-digit growth for 30 years, it's difficult to absorb the fact that they're only going to grow at 3 to 4% per annum. Now, just to put it in perspective, even if they grow at 3% per annum, they're still going to quantitatively add more in GDP terms than India growing at 8% per annum. But that's cold comfort to the Chinese citizen, who is used to being told that his or her salary is going to go up 10% every year because the economy is growing at 10%. Added to that is a demographic problem. The population is falling so rapidly as to cause anxiety within the general population. So if you are a couple in your early 30s or even mid 30s, you now have 4 parents to look after, all of whom are retired because they're in their 70s, and the average lifespan in China is now over 80. You have 1 child to educate, possibly more because now it's no longer a one-child policy. And you have to look after yourself and the spouse when they retire. What would you do? You wouldn't spend, you'd save. And the result is therefore that just when President Xi Jinping needs the domestic population to pick up the slack of excess production, the Chinese population is simply not spending, it's just saving. The last measure, of course, is for the state to pump prime, either to do public works, like India does MNREGA or what is now GRAMji, or to do direct benefit transfer, just give cash to the population and have them spend it. China isn't going to do direct benefit transfer. its basic philosophy is that they could move from a 2 to 3% growth to an 8% growth because they stopped direct benefit transfer. They told the population, start producing, become efficient, make more money. We're not going to just give you money to spend. They're not going back to direct benefit transfer. As far as public works are concerned, they have a problem. Their revenue model was land was being leased, and on the lease of that land, they were getting property taxes and they were getting the profits once they were developed and sold to the general population. China is overbuilt, both in terms of infrastructure and property. Nobody is leasing land anymore. Therefore, the state has no revenues and many of its districts are bankrupt. So what you have is a trifecta of economic problems that China now faces. And in these circumstances, the world has a dilemma. You have one major power which sees no benefit in supporting this world order. You have a second major power which is ambivalent about the world order simply because it likes the world order, but it doesn't have the capacity financially to support it or the willingness to spill blood to defend it, because with a one-child policy, no family is going to have their one child go to war. And there is no other middle power or group of middle powers which can actually take up the slack. And therefore, what you're going to have is a global order which is going to be profoundly disturbed for the next decade or longer. And we have to navigate as India in that extremely disturbed situation that is going to persist for at least 10 or 15 years with no end in sight, because the United States is not going to go back after Trump leaves office, since it is not Trump alone, but a system that supports him, and that system very much will continue to exist even after Trump leaves office. And because China increasingly feels that they don't want to invest in a world order where they're not being given their rightful share, and they are busy trying to create their own little cocoon or alternative order in which they intend to survive. Where does India go? Because I think I should say a few words on where India will go in that world order. I think a couple of things are quite clear to me. Firstly, I think the multipolar order was always a myth. We tried to sell it, but I don't think there was any truth in the fact that the world is multipolar. Yes, it's multilateral because two countries cannot decide everything in the world, and there are others which matter, but it is a multilateral world with very strong bipolar features, and it has to be that way. The United States and China are so far ahead of everybody else, technologically, economically, and militarily, that no combination of middle powers can actually replace them or actually act as a third pole. And just to give you the example, China's GDP today is bigger than the GDP of the next 5 economies added together. You add Germany, Japan, United Kingdom, France, and India, and the GDP of China exceeds the totality of those 5. The same is true with military spending. If you take the next 5 countries after China, China spends more militarily than the next 5 countries do. So I don't think that there is any basis to presume there's a multipolar order, and there isn't going to be one for at least another decade, although we might like to talk about it. The second thing is we have to recognize we are a sub-regional power. At best, we can exercise influence from the Persian Gulf to the Malacca Strait, and no further than that. But our future depends, of course, in the Indo-Pacific, and that's what we should focus on. Thirdly, I think we should recognize that Indian foreign policy is at an inflection point. Once the bipolar order ended after the fall of the Soviet Union, we built a foreign policy in which the central pillar was the Indo-US relationship. I think we can all agree that's a relationship under stress at the moment. With Russia, our relationship is weakened, and Russia has strengthened relations with China. In the case of China, the framework that we had of the relationship has completely broken down, and we don't have a new framework in place in the moment. And our own role in the global south is changing because as an emerging economy, our priorities sometimes differ from the rest of the global south. So we have to craft a foreign policy in an unstable world where both major powers are not committed to necessarily maintaining the current order, and in which our own relationships with other major powers are also undergoing change. I would think that really our first focus must be on our strengths, and I think there are some remarkable strengths we have. The first is geography. We are located in that part of the world which is going to become the global center over this century. Until the 1700s, it was the center of the world. And then the Europeans dominated and the axis of power shifted to the North Atlantic. And that's where it stayed for 500 years. But now there is no doubt that that axis of power is shifting back to the Indo-Pacific. And we just happen to be fortuitously located bang in the center of it. I think we need to leverage that strength. Secondly, we have advantage in demographics. Even by the end of this century, we will perhaps be the only country with a billion plus population. China will certainly be only 650 million. Africa might reach a billion, but there are 54 countries. No other country will have a billion population. Now, of course, if you go to the West, they'll tell you that doesn't really matter because humanoids and robots are going to replace population and you don't need labor to produce. And that's absolutely true. But robots can't eat, they can't wear clothes, and they can't see movies. So on the consumption side, you still need human beings. And India will be the single largest market, a single market, because Africa is 54 countries. And therefore, our demographics work for us. Thirdly, a growth trajectory works for us. We will grow at, we can argue whether we'll grow at 6% or 10%, but even at 6% growth, that economy is going to grow faster than virtually every other global economy in the world. And I think that's an incentive for us. Fourthly, we have political stability. And I think that's a very important factor we tend to forget. We confuse governmental stability with political stability. Governments come and go in a democracy, but we had 14 general elections and 18 transfers of power. And never once has that been questioned by anybody. And the only time when we deviated from democracy, which was 1975 to 1977, it was restored not by civil war, not by foreign intervention, but through the ballot box. I don't think a single country from Israel to Japan in that arc has that sort of political stability. And let's talk of China. Of course it has governmental stability. It's a single party system. Does it have political stability? We don't know. It's an extremely brittle political system. If it was so confident, Mr. Xi Jinping could have stood for elections and won the election, but he doesn't take that risk. And increasingly, in a situation where he has done away with all norms of succession, what you are likely to have is a very messy transition, potentially violent, if and when he leaves office. And therefore, by comparison, we are an extremely stable political entity. I think that's something we have to leverage. Lastly, of course, we also the only country in the Indo-Pacific which has both a measure of economic independence and military capability, limited as it is. Japan is constrained militarily, ASEAN is economically big but has no military capability, the Gulf Cooperation Council has lots of petrodollars but doesn't have a stable economy or barring oil and certainly no military capability. I think we have to build on these strengths and that requires us to focus on a few things. Firstly, we should know that our area of work has to be the Indo-Pacific, and we really need to develop strong ties and play a significant economic and political role in this area. Secondly, I think it goes without saying that 13% share of manufacturing in our GDP is not going to cut ice. We have to grow to 20%. But despite a Make in India campaign, that got stuck at 14%. And it's not showing any indications of actually going beyond that point. And at the end of it, as Mr. Priyadarshi said, interdependence is important, but beyond a point, if you want to be a strategic player, you have to certainly ensure that your manufacturing sector, at least in the strategic parts of your economy, are able to be independent and not necessarily dependent on others. Thirdly, I think we need to refocus our relations with the United States more realistically. There has to be a reciprocity in that relationship, not simply a unidirectional approach. We need to revive the relationship with Russia simply because it is the one country with which we have no fundamental conflict of interest and which has the necessary resources for India's economy to reach the 10, 20, 30 trillion capability. We need to have a stable and predictable relationship with China. Nobody is saying we are going to be friends. On the other hand, it will hurt us gravely if we have consistent and constant tensions. They have the capacity to exhaust you militarily and economically along the line of actual control if that remains unstable. And within the end of this decade, they're going to be to your south as well. You're facing a two-front problem with China in the Indian Ocean and on the northern border. Not having a stable or predictable relationship is not an option for us. And finally, we have to refine our position in the global south, something we seem to have abandoned over the past few years. We need to understand that is our natural constituency, that we need friends, and they are the friends who come to our support when we need them. I think our work is cut out for us in terms of foreign policy and in terms of domestic policy, but if we focus on those positive points I mentioned, our geography, our demographics, our political stability, our independent economic and military capabilities, and the growth trajectory we have, there's no reason why we can't actually navigate in what is a very unstable and changing global order. I'll stop this and thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to speak.
Thank you very much indeed, Mr. Gokhale. Very robust, very challenging, and very, very interesting conspectus on world affairs and India's role in it. Mr. Gokhale has kindly agreed to answer a question or two, and unless the Honorable Chancellor would like to ask a question, I will myself ask a question.
Thank you for a valuable information regarding the China. Just my question is that between the relation China and India, how we can come close to each other, in what respect and in which field?
I don't want to preempt the discussion in the afternoon on China. My own very short answer to this is that I think we have to differentiate between the sub-regional, the regional, and the international. Sub-regionally, I think we are on a collision course in South Asia, simply because our strategic periphery and theirs overlaps now. And therefore, we have to manage relations with our neighbors and with China in this context. Regionally, we are in competition in the Indo-Pacific. We are the only two major powers actually which have both the economic, the political, economic and military capability to make a difference, to shape this region. But globally, I think we need to recognize that the rise of China is in a sense beneficial to us, because for 500 years, the West has dominated access to capital and to technology. And as a result, they have been able to demand their own terms and conditions. China has broken that monopoly. Today, it offers technology, capital, equipment, services, and goods competitively to the rest of the world. We don't take advantage, or we don't take as much advantage for other reasons. But from that perspective, I think a more balanced world is one in which there is a counterbalance to the West, and that is China today. Hopefully, it's us tomorrow. It is in that area, I think, that we can work with China in a sustainable manner to ensure that it is to our mutual benefit. But I won't prejudice the discussion for the afternoon, because I think it requires time, and I think that's the focus of the afternoon's discussion.
Would none of the students be interested in asking a question? In which case, Mr. Vice Chancellor?
afternoon, sir, and thank you for good insight details. And I am Navjot Das from PG2, PSI here. And my question is, uh, in what ways does the transition from Sagar initiative to the expansive Mahasagar doctrine signify uh, India's intent to move from a regional maritime participant to a primary architect of security in the Indo-Pacific?
Yeah, so, of course, I think we have to acknowledge that one of the big shifts that are taking place in Indian foreign policy is to move away from a mindset which talked of neighborhood as something on land, and now looking at our neighborhood as a maritime neighborhood. Before the British came to India, actually India's prosperity didn't come from the Indo-Gangetic plain. That was the granary of India. It was really Gujarat, the Konkan, the Malabar coast, Cholamandalam and Bengal, including what is Bangladesh today, which was where India's wealth was really generated. We were a maritime nation until the British came and ensured that, that they took control of trade, and then we became obsessed with our northern and western borders. Fortunately, over the last 20 or 25 years, that mindset has changed. And the result of that, of course, was then subsequently crystallized by the current Prime Minister when he spoke of security and growth for all in the region, or Sagar, when he went to the Seychelles in, if I recall, May 2014 May 2015. And the idea was that India's prosperity would come from our oceanic neighbors, and it is towards that goal that we should therefore develop the Indian Ocean as a region for our economic benefit, for friendly relations with countries, to ensure our national security is preserved, and so on and so forth. And then, of course, the Prime Minister gave another speech in Singapore in 2018 at the Shangri-La Dialogue, in which he spoke of India's Indo-Pacific vision. In other words, looking beyond the northern Indian Ocean to what was the arc from Japan to the Gulf. And he used the words, this is the karma bhumi for India, the place where we will act, a place of action. And I think it is in pursuance of that, therefore, that the Sagar vision, security and growth for all in the region, was expanded to become Mahasagar. In other words, that it would include our look east policy or act east policy, our look west or act west policy, which was essentially our new initiatives in the Gulf region, to look towards East Africa, to bring countries like Madagascar and Comoros along with Mauritius, Seychelles into the whole idea of India's relationship with Indian Ocean countries, and then of course to look beyond the Malacca Strait to East Asia. Now, as part of this, of course, we have increased our relations and our activity with ASEAN, with Japan, with Australia. To some extent, our participation in the Quad, which is again going to convene next month when the US Secretary of State comes, is also part of that Mahasagar vision. So I think it's very much work in progress, but it is, I think, in sync with the view that the Indo-Pacific is now the center of activity for India. And within that, we have to build our economic, our military, and our foreign policy. We would like to hear your intervention.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Gokhale. It was really robust presentation. Not only that, but one that makes us all reflect and think very deeply about the issues you raised. So on behalf of everybody, the Chancellor, Vice Chancellor, and students and the faculty members, I'd like to thank you very much, and to wish you, I believe you're leaving shortly, to wish you bon voyage and hope to see you again.
Come, sir, after. Oh, group photo.
I would request all the dignitaries to please come up for a group photo. Thank you everyone for your patience. We are dispersing for lunch right now, and the post-lunch session would start at 2:30 p.m. We would request all of you